The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. The Ravens had figured out that Lapino was a rebel spy. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? I need more materials, thought Renato. What did you do if one of these platforms stalled? People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks passed, Renardo had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the Raven's call about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice.
Renardo looked around the empty village and reflected. The Sky Ripper had turned out to be far too dangerous to be used. Time to turn to what he knew best.
Ooh, what's there?
Sometimes, at home, he'd wave his sword around for hours.
"Give me a lever," said Archimedes, "and I shall open a gate." "Kill the rebel!" called one Raven. "Eat the rebel!" called another. Close to you.
Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Where had the mad rabbit got to?
Well, they really needed to redecorate anyway. What's he needing a sword?
Through his armor. Oh dear, that wasn't good.
I'll just have a dash, thought Renato. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am! The ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter. That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. Zenobia wasn't just the Emperor's daughter, of course. She'd been Renato's best friend in Sword Fu school. And you're still mad for her, the rabbit reminded him. They'd been close. She'd told him things no one else knew. But she'd never told him who she really was.
She knows all the Emperor's plans, chuckled the master spy.
She won't give them up easily.
She'll tell the interrogators, all right,
said Lapino. Taking her would change the game, all right. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty. Ice walls only let you through if they knew you were cool. Two eyes, good. One eye, dead.
So, what's this plan of yours?
Use me as bait, said Lupino. And he outlined a slightly complicated plan that involved geese, a net, setting the Farfarer a little bit on fire, Lupino dressing as an old blind toad, and Reynardo hiding inside a monstrous watermelon. What could possibly go wrong? Thought Reynardo. Oh, this is gonna be fun, said Lupino, as he ran to go set up his marvelous plan. Hey, a workbench! He could try out his new bling. He'd missed his old skills. He welcomed them back like it was at a reunion. Reynardo felt dubious about the whole plan. With every step, he was waiting for it all to go horribly wrong. But against all odds, Lupino's idiotic plan worked. Zenobia's ravens ran off after the geese, the net dropped, and Reynardo jumped out of the watermelon and put his sword to Zenobia's throat.
Reynardo, she said. Are those new scars? They look good on you. You never return my velvet jacket. It was my favorite. You look stupid in velvet. Oh, what does an imperial princess know about style? Oh, get a room, you two, said Lupino.
But the fleet was coming on fast, so they put Zenobia on the Farfarer and took her east over the Nexus.
She'd vanished from Swordfu School, from his life, without even saying goodbye, without ever telling him she was the Emperor's adopted daughter. Ah, Lupino was right, Reynardo thought reluctantly. She knows things. She recognized his look.
You're taking me to the interrogators, aren't you? She said, wide-eyed. And then she jumped, with horror. Renato saw Zenobia plummeting. Then he saw the Nexus below them. Cats always land on their feet.
Ah, she'll head for the Imperial outpost, yelled Lupino. You have to catch her.
Cats can run faster, but foxes can run longer. If he ran, he could head her off before she reached her minions at the outpost. Well, he did love a good chase.
This thing really needed a roof.
Boom! Renato wondered idly if people who had built these poles had really, really long tentacles. He had all the ingredients for a pretty nifty sword. He was closing on her. He could smell her fear. He tried not to think about the interrogators at the secret base. What did they do to her? Maybe it didn't have to end that way. Maybe he could talk to her. But, after all, there were worse things the Imperials had done to friends of his. I have what I need to craft any weapon, thought Renato. As long as it's a sword. Bernardo reached the outpost. The Imperials there were no match for him. Soon after, Zenobia limped up the path. When she realized he was already in front of her, she didn't even try to run. "Oh, you left without saying goodbye." Again, he said, "Please, you're enjoying this a little too much," she said, shaken. "Oh, spare us the chit-chat, would you?" said Lapino as he shackled her hands so she couldn't throw spells. "She knows all his plans." All the way back to the Farfarer, Lapino nagged Renato about how the interrogators would pry all the intel out of Zenobia. I thought would turn the tides in the imminent battle. All they had to do was take her to the rebels' secret base. Renato didn't like to think about what the interrogators would do to her. Couldn't he just talk to her? As they pulled away from the Nexus, Renato could see the fear in Zenobia's eyes. "I can't take her to those creatures at the base," he whispered to Lapino. "Ah, you've gone soft. Soft in the head. We captured her for what she knows." "I'll take her to the mountains. Tell all the horrible things the Emperor's done. Yeah, believe me, she'll turn." And he turned the wheel. "The hell you will!" shouted Lapino, and he grabbed the wheel back from him. The two of them wrestled for control of the ship. It shot off like a mad sparrow. Suddenly, Renato was falling. When he came to, Zenobia was standing over him. "Why didn't you take me to the base to be interrogated?" she demanded. "Do you know what's left of people they interrogate? This is some trick, isn't it? To make me fall for you again. Well, I won't." "Oh, go on then. Scurry back to your ravens. I can't stop you." But strangely, she didn't. As Renato set off to find the Farfarer, she followed him, keeping just out of sight of the ravens. He'd once met a pirate captain who used hooks to get around his ship. Oh, what was his name again? Imagine getting a horse up in one of these things. It would be cursing a blue streak. As Renato stopped to sniff the wind, Zenobia came up, still mad. "Did you really think you'd just talk me into betraying my father?" "Oh yeah, sure, that was exactly my plan." "Then why aren't you even talking to me?" "Because I've never talked you into anything in my life. They're gonna court-martial you for letting me go." He caught a whiff of the Farfarer. Wet rope, tar, and a cask of Scobel ale he'd spilt last year. It was that way. surprised that he didn't feel more pain. Just a bit dizzy. Whew. Hey, wanna hook up? Sorry, mustache, thought Renato. He was practically sure he'd find something useful in one of the... Renato wondered if he should have taken Zenobia to the rebel base for real. Maybe she wasn't playing him after all. After the bleak talk about the Emperor's dark secrets, he was regretting his suspicions. Sure enough, the Farfarer had crashed in some rocks. There was no sign of Lupino. Zenobia caught up. All that kid stuff in Swordfu School. Look, look, that's the past. We're adults now. We have duties to other people. We have destinies. What are you talking about? And you are the most arrogant, slow-witted, light-fingered, mercenary, immoral, reckless... Run away with me, said Renato, and he realized he meant it. What? Just like that? She demanded. I will, if you will. So, she kissed him. And it was the best kiss he'd ever had. They held hands as they boarded the Farfarer. Renato felt light-hearted, like the winds that were playing the rigging like a balalaika. But Lupino, I need to get back to Lupino, he said, suddenly realizing he could have been captured. A prisoner. He's not. How'd you know? He saw something in her eyes he didn't understand. He fell, didn't he? Into the abyss. She looked away, wouldn't answer. But then a bolt smashed through the Farfarer's keel. The broken ship plummeted out of the clouds. Renato picked himself off the deck. They were alive. We have to get to my private ship, she said. Do you trust me? I guess I must, he said. You go on ahead. Clear the path, she said. I can't kill my own soldiers. He wanted to say that he didn't trust her, that he had no idea what he was getting into. But he had no choice, did he? He was following his heart. That's what it means to be a hero. You had to follow your heart.
Haven't you always wanted to do that? The portal was heavily guarded. It must go someplace that you didn't want it to go. Of all the artisans he was creating employment for, truly, he was a job creator. That could have gone better, thought Bernardo as he died. That was always a rush. With the new aerobics craze. Am I right?
their breath. It was strange to be so close to her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm trying very hard not to think." "Me too," he said. Up ahead, he could see the thin silver of Zenobia's personal ship. It looked fast. They would leave all this behind. It's a vertical! Renato had always wanted a flying carpet. This was more like a flying tabletop, but it would do. As they reached her ship, Renato suddenly felt a sharp pain in his stomach. He was surprised to see a crossbow bolt sticking out of it.
"I was going to lead the Empire to a secret base," said Lapino. "But no, you had to screw up my plan because you still got a thing for her."
Renato stared at Zenobia. The kiss. Was it real? She said, with a look of indescribable sorrow. She gestured and said an arcane word, and Lapino went flying into the abyss, screaming, "I'm telling your father!" Then she knelt down to cradle his head, and her paws felt very soft and warm. Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. and still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learned another true thing. Lapino was a traitor. Renato had suspected there was something wrong with the mad rabbit. But now he knew there was malice behind his goofiness. But that meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and
the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens?
The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters.
The Iblis stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous.
And so, Renato went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? This one contained nothing but unmatched gloves. And something more useful.
air here tasted bitter. The steps were too tall for a person. The entire place felt restless, like it had been vexed to nightmare under the dust, waiting for its hour to come around at last.
Those flames really bring out your eyes.
Those sheaves are really very well made, aren't they? The ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late.
Get over here!
It wasn't his fault. They looked so breakable. It would be fun to throw healing fruit at people. They wouldn't know whether to be mad or not. Oops. Thought, Renato? Time to die, he thought. And it was.
of power. Ooh, he didn't find those every day. How could a temple to Iblis still even exist? The Transcendent Emperor had destroyed all the shrines of the lost gods after exiling them. Had it been buried in that long-ago battle? Or had Iblis foreseen his fate and hidden it from his enemy? That could come in handy in a pinch.
Go away.
The Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people.
Leonardo wondered if his future self had commissioned these poles. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager. Thirsty. Kill the Emperor's daughter. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Leonardo wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Skyripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the Transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. It's the core, said the stone anxiously. Gives you the power to do what you want. The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance. The stone felt a bit clingy. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Sky Ripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods. Even without its armature, the core would still possess great power. He would go there. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Reynardo had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Swordful School together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him every secret about herself. Except the biggest one. That she was the Emperor's daughter. No. Kill Zenobia, whispered the stone. Before it's too late.
Wasn't making a dent in those shields.
No one could beat Reynardo at hot potato. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead. He wished there were more pylons he could use the hook on. They really needed to construct additional pylons. The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. "The core will kill you." "Are you afraid of it?"
No, don't be ridiculous.
It chuckled.
But it's unstable. It will poison you so much as carry it. And if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically.
Reynardo did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards.
surprisingly unwounded. Of course there was a puzzle. You couldn't expect the transcendent Emperor to bury a god's eye in a leather sack where anyone could pick it up. Is a swan. Would he join up? He dyes his feathers. Landed a claw on him.
As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical.
No, it's too much power. We will rip a hole in space and time.
He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out.
When Renato came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent.
"I can't hear you," he sang out, and "You?" It didn't answer.
"Ha!" he said. He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? As the Farfarer made its way toward the Nexus, Renato watched sparks fly out of the core. The Iblis stone sucked them in hungrily. You'd think the stone would want this kind of power, wouldn't it? Thought Renato. Well, the scientists would explain it all.
This time, Renato was sure he'd figured out how to use the core safely.
See? He'd trusted his gut, and it had worked out. That's what it meant to be a hero. To ignore the naysayers and the odd-makers, and do what you knew was right, and have it turn out to be the right thing. Well, he wasn't worried. Once he got to the observatory, the scientist toads could explain it. Then he could carry the war into the enemy's camp and destroy them all. Oh dear, he was getting a little bloodthirsty, wasn't he?
Swell. He'd always wanted to do that. Bernardo, smash!
Maybe I should follow my nose, thought Renato.
Hey, do old ravens go grey? You know what? Don't worry about it.
Don't look down, he thought.
Bernardo had never felt better in his life. Normally, a battle would wear him down and he would need a night's sleep. Now he felt like he could go all night and all day. He felt like people were cheering him on, and he could practically hear their applause as he slew one raven after another.
The Imperial fleet was closing in on the rebels, forcing them to come out and fight.
Renato was itching to bring the fight to the enemy.
He had to remind himself not to be too reckless.
Don't look down, he told himself. Don't look down. Who made all these ore chests anyway? Well, you could have quite a business doing that. The Toads at the observatory measured the stone with their occult devices. I fed it the core of Sky Ripper, explained Renato. No more thievy blood and souls.
But the core is not an unlimited energy source,
said one Toad. Another said,
There's a feedback loop, you see, which could overload the stone.
Yeah, the stone doesn't actually feed on souls,
claimed a third.
but on pain of killing another sentient being. If you can truly be at peace with yourself, it would not overload.
This was all very confusing. At peace. Yes, the mountains were peaceful and quiet, but he now had the power to turn the tides. He should report to the Rebellion Council and prepare for the decisive battle.
Thing he understood from all the Toad arguments. Maybe the stone did not feed on blood, or souls, or rage. It fed on empathy. It fed on the pain he felt when he put an end to another being's existence. Even if that other being was a raven intent on killing him. If he could find peace, then he could use the power of the Ibla stone without being taken over by its evil. The mountains. He would go to the mountains. He could find peace there. Unfortunately, the mountains were not empty. There were ravens everywhere. No matter. He had to fight, yes, but he didn't have to be angry. Parry, dodge, slash, and breathe. Yes, focus on the rhythm, the dance of it, not on the blood or the raven's core as they died. Ah, it was working. He wasn't feeling those dark jolts of eldritch energy. He wasn't feeding the Iblis stone.
burnt fur. His. Smashing things was fun. A very clever engineer named Elon Muskrat got his start making floating platforms. Not many people knew that. That is how we do it, said Renato to himself. The stone was still silent. His mind was his own, and his heart too. He bore them no ill will, these ravens. They were doing their job. They were expressing their nature. Dance, whirl, parry, jab, and breathe. It was all so simple, wasn't it? Something was missing. He didn't feel truly at peace. Wait. Wasn't this near a Calaveras switch? The sage would help him figure it all out. Renato was remembering all his old tricks, and some new ones. He really ought to ask for a raise. The Iblis Stone, silenced by the Sky Ripper's core, had given Renato enough power to challenge the Imperial fleet. But what Renato was seeking was inner. The rebellion was on the verge of extinction, but it would have to wait.
At the end of the mountain path, he found the wise Calaveras in his workshop. "Do you fix souls or only artifacts?" he asked the sage.
Does your soul need fixing?
Asked the sage. "I've been killing a lot of ravens lately," he told the sage.
You're a fox,
said Calaveras.
To kill birds is part of your nature. Take joy in it. I mean, I might as well worry about eating flies. Don't you like a fly?
It was true. That's what he had forgotten. The joy. Now he was ready for the final battle. The Farfarer cut through the clouds. The air had never felt so sweet since he was a child.
There it was. The dreaded Imperial fleet. He could smell wet hemp ropes ahead, wood and tar, and ravens. Even the fleet smelt good, somehow. He was ready.
He was ready.
Renato had it all squared away in his head.
He would kill the Emperor. Isengrim III had begun well, but he had gone mad. He was trying to invoke the lost gods by means of dark, blasphemous rituals. That was a secret. But the victims had spoken to Renato. The ghosts had spoken. No. No anger. Renato could not afford anger. It was empowering the crystal in his sword. That made him stronger, but it clouded his mind. He would not be a hero. A hero strives. Renato would just be one with everything. The Emperor would die, and the wheel would turn, and all would be restored without rancor, without sorrow, without pain.
Big eyes you have. If they didn't want their things broken, they really ought to make them stronger. hoped his hook didn't break.
I think this is yours, said Renato, but he couldn't hear his enemy's answer. But the more he thought about it, and he had so much more time to think about it now that he was not worrying about the battle, killing the Emperor would not change anything. Another would take his place. Perhaps Zenobia. Perhaps the Speaker of the Rebel Council, and power would corrupt them too, and death would make grief, and grief would lead to hatred. He must lead by example. Reject the violence. Reject the desire to create violence. But how? This would be the perfect place for a tic-tac-toe board. Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? Finally, he came to the Emperor's ship. The path behind him was strewn with dead ravens. The path to enlightenment. His mistake, he realized, was trying to change the world. The world would spin and the wheel would revolve whether he strove against it or not. What he had to do was nothing. He had attained enlightenment. He sat down, adopted a full lotus position, and began to meditate. And all around him, the warriors stopped fighting too. They knew. They could feel his enlightenment. They gave up fighting, dropped their weapons, and became his disciples. No, just kidding. The nearest raven stabbed him with a sword and then chopped off his head. I might not have thought this through properly. Thought Renato's head as it rolled around the deck and died. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book
was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future, when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, but he'd learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the Path of Destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it.
The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens?